Paul's visit and then first letter to the Thessalonians could easily be traced in Luke's narrative in Acts 17 to 18. But this second letter gives us no clues as to where it fits in the chronology of Paul's missions. Perhaps the most that can be said is that it was probably written not long after the first one. The first letter spoke of persecutions without giving much detail. Apart from this, the very young church seemed free of the factions, disputes, and false teachings from outsiders that plagued other churches. This second letter contains hints of false teaching, seemingly given even in Paul's name, about the day of the Lord. The teaching is that the day of the Lord is already here. This teaching has had the effect of unsettling or alarming the Thessalonians. What could this teaching have been exactly? Unfortunately, we're not given any information about this new idea. It may have been some teaching of the kind that Paul combated in his first letter to the Corinthians and in his second letter to Timothy. These teachings had brought forward the future into the present. In Corinth, some thought they were already reigning in life and so had no need of things like marriage. In 2 Timothy, there were some who believed the general resurrection of the dead had already happened. In the Gospel of Thomas, which is a Gnostic rewriting of Jesus' sayings, the disciples ask Jesus when the kingdom will come, and Jesus tells them it already has, but they didn't notice. All we can know about the Thessalonian situation is how Paul tackles it. Like the similar issue he addresses in the first letter, it is a problem of sequence. There, Paul assures them that the final sequence will not edge out those already dead, but will include them, indeed prioritize them, so that they will be first raised and then gathered together with the living, and then they will be with the Lord and meet him and be with him forever. Here in 2 Thessalonians, Paul needs to straighten out the sequence again, but this time the goal is to put the end back into the future where it belongs. It is not here now. Paul had taught them beforehand that the resurrection of the dead precedes the very end, the judgment. Somehow, this clarity has been lost, or at least unsettled. So Paul points to another key thing in the end time sequence, which has not yet happened: the revealing of the lawless one. It is important to notice that Paul, in verse 3, begins with the warning, "Let no one deceive you in any way." Deception is the hallmark of the end times. We are going to see this particularly in Revelation. Now that God has fully revealed himself and his salvation in Christ, the devil does his best to copy, imitate, and parody everything he can about it. That is why he does miracles, calls fire down from heaven, and even has his own sort of resurrection. We already live now in an age where, because of technology, many on all sides are competing for control of the narratives and which facts you see and which are suppressed or altered. But what the New Testament is talking about is different. It is not the truth in general, but the truth about who God is. This includes claiming he is the God of Islam or of the Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, but it also includes claims about his return and his manifestation in either a person or perhaps a state or a denomination of the church. Paul tells the Thessalonians that before the day of the Lord actually comes, there must first be a rebellion, during which the lawless one is revealed. He declares himself to be God, but he is destined for destruction. Something is holding him back, but when the time is right, the restraint will be removed, and the lawless one will be revealed, only to be destroyed by the breath of Jesus' mouth when he returns. However, preparations are already underway by Satan for the unleashing of the lawless one. He uses all kinds of tricks to deceive people, including powerful signs and wonders, so that people are already deluded and will believe the lie when it is unveiled, and so will not be saved. It is important to notice that Paul sees these deceptions are for those who are already perishing. In other places in his letters, Paul talks about the gospel message as being life to those who are being saved, but the fragrance of death to those who are perishing, or those who are already dying. It is mysterious, but it explains why it is that some believe and some will not. Some see the light and see salvation, others see it and see judgment. It is like Jesus' command, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Those who cannot hear will not hear. Those who are perishing will believe the lies that will lead them to death, and you will not be able to persuade them otherwise. Moreover, God confirms them in their love of lies and unrighteousness by sending this powerful delusion so that they will certainly be condemned. Again, Jesus taught that to the one who has, more will be given, but to the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Paul does not explain this to the Thessalonians. We are left to ponder exactly what he meant. There was a general expectation that things would steadily get worse before the end. Jesus spoke of hearts growing cold, people betraying each other, fear and war increasing, and also signs in nature, such as earthquakes. Certainly a decrease in moral values and disintegration of society was expected. But what Paul and Jesus focused on in particular was the threat of being deceived about Jesus' return. Other things were to come, but it was imperative that, no matter how impressive, claims about the return or manifestation of Jesus were to be rejected, even if to reject them meant persecution by the state, as we shall see with the sea beast in Revelation 13. There are several parts of the New Testament which speak about this time before the end, and it is worth briefly summarizing them. We saw in 1 John how he talked about the Antichrist, and even how many Antichrists had already gone out into the world. John was talking specifically about the spirit which denies that Jesus has come in the flesh, a heresy we now know as Arianism, which is believed by cults like the Jehovah's Witnesses. And of course, modern Judaism and Islam, though they might respect Jesus as a prophet or great teacher, would not accept him as the Son of God and Messiah. Revelation, as we shall see, emphasizes the spiritual deception and oppression by the state. It is the state, in particular Rome, which claims the allegiance and honor which is due to God alone. In 2 Thessalonians, however, Paul speaks of something restraining the lawless one. Probably the most natural interpretation is that it is God himself via a powerful angel who is doing the restraining. But some thought Paul was thinking of the state, which was a God-ordained thing, as he said in Romans 13, which was there to do good, impose order, and punish wrongdoing. When Christianity became the religion of the empire, this view grew more popular. But over time, as corruption set in, the popularity of this view waned and returned to seeing God as the restrainer. Both Jesus and Paul spoke of one who sets up a statue in the temple and enthrones himself there. About a decade before the writing of 2 Thessalonians, in 40 AD, the Emperor Caligula had tried to set up a statue of himself in the temple, but was blocked by the Jews. Before that, the Roman general Pompey, having conquered Jerusalem in 63 BC, actually entered the temple and looked around it, even entering the most holy place, despite much protest. He did not set up a statue, but he did die a little later, and some Jews regarded this as divine vengeance for his arrogance. But the worst example of temple desecration was Antiochus Epiphanes IV, who tried to deconvert the Jews and turn them all effectively into Greeks. This involved forbidding circumcision and setting up a statue of Zeus in the temple, thereby completely desecrating it. This features in the prophecies of Daniel, and a little of Paul's language here in chapter 2 echoes Daniel 11:36 in particular. But though Antiochus was predicted by Daniel, Jesus, and therefore Paul, also saw from Daniel that a final lawless one, modelled on Antiochus, was yet to come. He is characterized as one who tries to claim the position and status of God, and who will employ many deceptions to that effect. But, as Paul says here in our passage, and as Daniel predicts, God and the saints will conquer. For us Christians, we need not be concerned as to the outcome, which is guaranteed victory. Our concern, for ourselves and our brothers and sisters, and anyone else who will listen, is not to be deceived.